Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Nashville Scene podcast. I'm one of your amazing hosts, Jerome Moore, and I'm here with my other amazing host, editor-in-chief of the Nashville Scene, D.P. Rodgers.
D.P. Rodgers, that's right.
I'm going with D.P. Rodgers today.
That's whatever you want to call me, Jerome.
Yeah,
D. Patrick.
That's what we say, D. Patrick.
I insist on
I say
D.
DPR. I like it. For whatever reason, I wish I had like an acronym name.
You can.
Just JLM.
JLM is great.
It doesn't.
Sounds like a company.
Yeah.
My JLM stock is through the roof right now. Welcome back, guys. It's episode 2 of season 2. We're joined this week by staff reporter Eli Motycka. Back once again. Is this your third appearance?
Yes.
If you remember, they just really let him out of county.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Free Eli shirts.
Free Eli shirts coming soon. We can make it happen. I think we can. You know what I'm saying? It'd be like a fundraising effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little side gig for us, side hustle. So we're here this week because we're talking about the election, the Davidson County general election, the state and federal primary elections taking place on August 1st, with early voting already open now until July 27th.
Yep. Go vote early.
Early vote. It is in 12 locations around the city. You can find links to where to vote, the times to vote at our site or via nashville.gov. So there's a lot to dive into, and I'm just going to kind of start with what's going to be on the Davidson County General, because a lot of this is going to be primary races that we'll get into with Eli, who covered a whole lot of this stuff in this week's cover package. But just as far as what you're going to see if you're a Davidson County voter in the generals, most of this has already been decided in the primaries, right? So you've got folks like Stephanie Williams is unopposed for 4th Circuit Court judge. Vivian Wilhoit, longtime property assessor, she's unopposed for property assessor. The only race where you're going to see a matchup with a Democrat versus a Republican here in Davidson County is for Metro Nashville Public School Board seat 1, District 1. That's going to be Robert Taylor, who's a Democrat. He is a Meharry Medical College employee, and he's taking on Demetris Savage Short, who's a Republican. She's worked as a nurse. You can find Kelsey Byler, our education reporter, has done a story on that race. It's a lot of things about school choice and parental rights is something that the Republican candidate Savage Short has brought up there. You can read all about that.
And it's still wild to me that the school board candidates or just elections now are, not a partisan, which is
that's all based on a law that passed in 2021.
Yeah,
Until then, it was just standard. You want to run, you run. Now they're partisan, and so often in a city like Nashville, you don't have competitive Republican primaries.
Right.
So it's kind of doing 2 elections. There might be a competitive Democratic primary earlier in the year, but once that's determined, then you've got your candidate.
Yeah.
So, that's the only one where there was a Republican because of that law passing a few years ago.
Yep.
So that's pretty much all you got as far as the Davidson County General. But what I really want to get into is a lot of the stuff that Eli was focused on in his cover stories this week, starting at the kind of the top of the ticket with a big race. The Senate primaries, United States Senate. On the right, of course, you have the incumbent Republican Marsha Blackburn. She does have a minor challenger, but really the face-off there is going to be in the general in November, because on the left you've got Gloria Johnson leading the pack of the Democrats.
Yeah.
So what are we seeing in that primary?
In the Democratic primary, it's mainly Gloria Johnson and Marquita Bradshaw, who is from Memphis. She's black. She's an environmental executive, nonprofit executive, and organizer, activist. Yeah. She ran a few years ago as well.
Yeah. For Haggerty's seat, the other Republican senator, she was.
So people know her name, but people really, really know Gloria's name as well, specifically because of the protests that took place in the chamber alongside Justin Jones and Justin Pearson. And Gloria was one of those central figures in the Tennessee 3 in early April 2023.
Right. Within a week or so of the Covenant shooting.
Yeah.
Those
she's always been a strong voice. Yeah. She's been in and out. She represents Knoxville, or parts of Knoxville and East Tennessee. She's been in and out of the chamber as a representative over the past 10, 12 years. So she served a couple terms and then lost re-election and then won the seat again. She's very well known. She is a very strong speaker and very quick to reply and to call out Republicans and Republican leadership, and she's been kind of a thorn in the side of the supermajority for basically her whole time there. She's well liked, well respected, and she raised a lot of money, specifically because of her national profile after the Tennessee 3.
Right.
Yeah, and that's like right when she announced re-election. It was right in the wake of that. I think it was in July.
Yeah, she sort of rode that, not just sort of attention, but I mean, she, like you said, she's been active in the legislature. She's in a somewhat competitive district where she's had a Republican challenger that has won a time or two, so she's used to fighting in a general election.
Yeah.
She's a former educator, so she cares a lot about things like, school safety and gun control, and she's been very at the forefront of those conversations for longer than just a couple of years.
And when we think about this, so she first, like you said, this is a primary issue. We're talking about the primary. She's facing Marquita Bradshaw. She has a big fundraising advantage, and based on polling that I've heard from her campaign, she has a big advantage in the polls as well.
Okay.
But the presence of Marquita has also kept some black lawmakers from coming out and endorsing Gloria because it would be directly, endorsing the opponent of Marquita Bradshaw, who's also well liked, well respected.
Conflict of interest, maybe.
They're just gonna stay. They're gonna stay out of the primary, and then come back and support the Democratic nominee.
And you see that sometimes in primaries, folks just sort of wait for that to get settled so they can, go all in behind their party's
I say
nominee.
pick a side. Pick a side.
It doesn't look that close right now.
Yeah,
so I
that's
think,
true.
and the story that I wrote in this issue is that Gloria has been attacking Marsha Blackburn, not Marquita.
Right.
She's been going straight for, basically since she announced the campaign in July, going straight for her Republican opponent, that she would see the incumbent. And Marsha is very strong, and the Democrats have not had a really strong challenger since 2018, since Phil Bredesen.
Yeah.
Phil Bredesen, she beat, for that,
by a lot.
For that first term. Yeah, and Phil Bredesen, former governor, well-liked governor, two-term governor, somebody who, I won't rat out members of my family, but certain conservatives in my family voted for Phil Bredesen.
Yeah.
He's somebody who did well, and then something happened in this past 10 years, and a Democrat hasn't won a statewide election. So Gloria is kind of the latest best hope, I feel like, for big statewide office.
Yeah, and the issues that apparently are polling really strong for Democrats are gun violence, where Gloria is tied directly to this big moment in Tennessee politics, in the wake of the Covenant School shooting, and abortion protection for reproductive rights, where Gloria has been clearly on the side of being able to have control of your reproductive rights, and the Republican Party, Marsha Blackburn, have opposed that. Though it does blunt the advantage somewhat, you probably would think, running against a woman in Marsha Blackburn rather than like an old white man that has become the face of the anti reproductive rights movement.
Right. And Marsha Blackburn, the first woman to hold a U.S. Senate seat in Tennessee, I believe. So this will be the first two major party women candidates for a U.S. Senate seat in Tennessee, I believe. So it's, quite the one to watch. And Republican, Marsha Blackburn does have a challenger in the Republican primary, sort of like a perennial candidate kind of thing. So she'll just sort of waltz into that.
She's done a really good job politically, like a strategic job politically of basically appealing to the entire Republican Party and its right wing and the furthest Trump wing of the party. Like, she has credibility. She grew up as a politician in these activist Tea Party, proto-Tea Party spaces. And so, she has strong support and she has strong fundraising. I think she's raised millions of dollars for this race already.
Very known quantity in Tennessee. She was in the state House, and then she was, in Congress, and now, and she was, opening night of the Republican National Convention. I think it was night one anyway.
Yeah, she has a national profile.
Yes, she's just sort of like across the board. Republicans, know her and like her. And
how do you get a post on something like this, where if you're based in Middle Tennessee, Nashville, like you probably may lean towards more of a Gloria, but we know Tennessee is bigger than Nashville. Yeah. And so how do voters really get a pulse on like where things are happening and not be kind of constricted to their bubble of community on perspective in a vote like this? Or a race like this, I should say.
If you want to know what Tennessee is like and you live in Nashville, like you should drive, go camping, visit some other cities, visit some of the cities like Cookeville, Clarksville, Crossville that have 100,000, or the greater suburban area have 100,000 plus people. That density, like that, makes up at least as much as the major cities.
Absolutely, yeah.
Nashville.
I mean, and of course, we think of Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, Knoxville to some extent as these sort of bastions, but really there's a lot of people in Sumner County and Williamson County, in Murray County, these places that vote consistently conservative.
With a relatively strong candidate, and then we can move on from this one because I know we got
there's a lot to get to.
With a relatively strong candidate in Gloria Johnson, with good fundraising, with a real campaign, she's traveling to all counties in the state. The Democrats, if they stand a hope of winning, particularly in the purple-ish suburbs, which is like where they're eyeing gains. Murfreesboro, Clarksville suburbs, Memphis, Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville suburbs. If they're going to get state with a strong candidate, people are going to come out to vote. It's a presidential year. They're going to get data on who's voting and where they live, and maybe try to pin some trends down that they can capitalize on.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So want to move into U.S. House of Representatives and to the other congressional races, which includes, I'm going to start with the 5th congressional district. This is the one that was gerrymandered, split in 3, right in the center of Nashville. Now we have 3 Republicans representing Nashville in the U.S. House rather than longtime Democrat Jim Cooper. Right. So the 5th, of course, it looks completely different than when Cooper was in office, but Representative Andy Ogles, pretty far-right candidate, he won that race 2022.
Out of Columbia, right?
Yeah, he's
he was the Columbia County mayor.
Murray County mayor.
Murray County mayor.
And so he's the incumbent, but he's being challenged in the Republican primary by Courtney Johnston, who's a Metro Council member. Eli also got into that in our cover story, and that's a really interesting one to me. And we'll also talk about the Democratic nominee because she's unchallenged, but I want to dig into this Republican primary in D5.
Yeah. Courtney, we got to sit down with her and talk, me and Matt Masters, and she says that she grew up as a Republican. She remembers seeing Ronald Reagan making speeches when she was a kid. She grew up in Louisiana, and she didn't identify as all that political until her house got broken into, and that, like, in 2017, I believe, she got involved in neighborhood issues, particularly in her Creve Hall, southeast Nashville neighborhood. Like we call it Brantioch a little bit, like between Antioch and Brentwood. It's a little wealthier, a little whiter, but not quite as Brentwood. And she ran for council. She won 2019. She's been one of the most vocal and visible conservative figures on Metro Council.
Consistently,
yeah. And there's not that many, so she's really been like a magnet for money. She raised a lot of money. We wrote about this a year or two ago. She raised a lot of money for a council member. She has a lot of relationships, and she's been a full-time politician since that time. She quit her day job, is what she told us, as a real estate agent. And so she has been building her brand, building her networks, and she said she was approached, or people started to spread this rumor that she was going to be challenging Andy Ogles. And so she launched a campaign with the help of Kim Kagi, who's her treasurer, who's an extremely well-known, well-connected, powerful, successful Republican fundraiser who's worked for all of the biggest name Republicans in Tennessee's history, from Fred Thompson to Bill Haslam to Bill Lee. And those are some of the names on Courtney Johnston's disclosure. Not Thompson, but Haslam. And some of conservatives that you would recognize,
big
Bobby
names,
Joslin.
former governors, are putting their weight behind Johnson, which you don't normally see.
Yeah, that's kind of
in a primary contest.
So what we learned and what I wrote about is that the real issue with Ogles that some people have is that he's embarrassing. He's embarrassed them. He's embarrassed Nashville and Middle Tennessee. And it's not about the issues. It's not like Courtney Johnston is attacking him on many of his stances. She's attacking him on the character and his professionalism, or lack of professionalism, because these scandals have followed him from before he took office.
Right.
He is seen as a stunt politician, trying to get attention, trying to make headlines, rather than actually build relationships and bring money and investment and kind of.
He had the infamous family photo.
Family photo with the
rifles. I don't ARs. I don't know what type of rifles it was, but
big guns.
Big guns. Yeah.
This is what Courtney says. She says he's out there for attention and for his personal brand, and this is what people who know him also have
kind of aligned with the sort of Marjorie Taylor Greenes. The other members in the House are sort of pretty far right, very MAGA. He also had scandals with his resume. Phil Williams over at News Channel 5 was really hammering him on that, but there was a lot of inconsistencies and like outright, exaggeration.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is
he
what
really wanted that job.
Exactly. And he wanted to have the national profile and have the attention. And this is when you talk to people, to Republicans, conservatives who are choosing between these two, they'll say, just Andy Ogles, he just embarrasses us as Tennesseans. It's not really about abortion or reproductive rights,
about any issues
or immigration. And for what we know, I mean, I wrote some nuances for Courtney's issues, but really she promised to be working with the party and along the party line, which is led by President Trump. So that will dictate the platform and the initiatives.
Yeah,
and she has been very pro-Trump in her messaging.
But she's been mainly hitting this fact that especially prominent Republican business people and people who are really proud of Tennessee have been embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Miriam Abu-Fazli, who we have covered quite a bit, she's unopposed in the Democratic primary. So whether it's Ogles or Johnston, whoever wins that Republican primary will be facing off against Miriam, who actually was one of our Nashvilleians of the Year last year in a cover piece written by Kelsey Byler, our education reporter and frequent political reporter, because Miriam she's been involved in political activism for a while, but was really at the center of the protests about gun violence following Covenant. So that's really central to her campaign, her stances. So whoever she takes on, whether it's Ogles or Johnston, that's probably where we're going to see a lot of attention, right?
Right.
Yeah.
There's of course another couple of congressional seats. Nashville being split in 3. There's the 6th district where there's a 3-way race for the Democratic primary to take on John Rose. John Rose, of course, has made a lot of national headlines over the past few years. His wife he met when he was, I believe, 41. She was 17. And we've got, a 3-way race for who will take him on among the Democrats. Then in the 7th, there are 2 primaries that are unopposed. Megan Barry is running for the Democratic nomination, and Mark Green, the incumbent there, is running for Republican. They'll both cinch that, so it's going to be a face-off with Megan Barry and Mark Green come November. Yep. So that'll be another intense one. Megan Barry, though, it is worth noting she's raised a lot of money. A lot of these folks have been raising a lot of money. There's a lot of money moving around in these primaries.
You have to.
Yeah. So she'll have that on hand to take on Green. Of course, Megan Barry, former mayor who resigned in 2018.
And Courtney Johnston has raised a lot of money as well.
Yeah, a lot of these folks we mentioned. And in fact, Courtney Johnston has outraised Ogles, the incumbent, quite a bit, which isn't, again, not very common, right?
Yeah, and from the checks that we've seen in the recent disclosures, just paying ads, paying staff, paying ads, getting advertising, getting your face out there, getting your name out there.
So then we get to these state races. Then we're now finally at the state primaries. I want to start with, there's a few House races around Davidson County, but by and large, Democrat incumbents aren't really opposed by serious challengers by and large. Justin Jones, who of course everybody knows is another member of the Tennessee 3, he's unopposed in the primary, but he'll have a Republican competitor in November. But the next race I really want to talk about is District 60. You wrote a piece about this, Eli, last week, where you've got Shondell Brooks and is it Tyler Brasher? Tyler Brasher. Yeah. What's going on in that race?
That race, so a House district often will get decided by few thousand votes, and that race is between 2 candidates who represent, for a lot of people, as seen by elected lawmakers, the future of how Democrats are supposed to win in these
in their first time candidates, right?
Both of them. Yeah.
Okay.
And so Shondell Brooks is a gun violence an anti-gun violence activist. She lost her son in the Waffle House shooting. And has a foundation in his memory, and she has a necklace with his name on it,
blue
and
hair.
Her hair is blue because that's his color. So a lot of her campaign and her politicization has come from anti-gun violence activism, and she's very comfortable speaking on that issue. But she also made the point to us that as a single mom, she's seen how the healthcare system is broken and how hard it is to survive in this state and in this country economically, and when she's in front of a microphone, she speaks very well to these issues, and she's sort of shows that she wants to join this growing movement against the Republican supermajority aggressively and clearly. And Justin Jones has raised about $1 million after the Tennessee 3 boost. And the only check that I've seen so far has gone to Shondell Brooks. Yep. She's also gotten a lot of other endorsements, Heidi Campbell and other state lawmakers. And so there's some of the party that's saying, these are the type of people we want. We want new faces. Yeah. We want a Black representative who's going to talk about gun violence and talk about their personal story and share really personal, vulnerable, emotional experiences that they've gone through. And so that's Shondell, and we met and talked for about an hour with one of her sons and some campaign staff. They had been out knocking doors, and so she's exhausted but excited. Tyler Brasher, he's a father of a young child and has a young family. They moved to the district recently, and his campaign manager is Jordan Huffman, who's a council member for that district. And he has come up with what we would consider probably a little more like recognizable stepping stones for a local elected official, which is like the neighborhood association, the chamber of commerce, the like bread and butter. If you go to the grandfather or grandmother of the party and you say, how do I get involved in politics? You start building those relationships. I believe
he's involved in community oversight and Hermitage too.
Yes, he was. I think he was on the participatory budgeting committee, perhaps. Okay. So just like get involved, join these committees, start to get to know people, and from the these organizations that are on the very local Donaldson Hermitage level. And so he's built his campaign on those relationships, and that's something that his campaign and Huffman, they say a lot, is that he knows a lot of people. He's a very familiar face in the district, and that's hoping to be the base of the party. And Darren Jernigan, who was the former the representative, he was known as being more middle of the road, a Democrat, voted with Democrats, but had a lot of, Sam Whitson, the outgoing Republican representative in Williamson County, was one of his closest friends. He was known for really aggressively cultivating bipartisanship among his constituents, which is not, it's not a clearly Democratic district.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a bit of the mold that Tyler Brasher is hoping to embrace too. Right. Jernigan's wife has endorsed Brasher. Jernigan can endorse anyone directly because he's working as a liaison.
Right.
Or
his new role is he's working with the Mayor O'Connell's administration as kind of a liaison with the legislature. So again, he's still very much a part of
supporting I'm assuming supporting the Democrat who comes out of this primary, but not getting involved in the primary and just sitting back. And other lawmakers, local elected officials, council members have got behind Brasher. So it's kind of like this vote has happened before the actual primary has happened, which is like, what kind of candidates do we want to see to win back these purplish suburban areas? Yeah. In this case in Nashville, but it may also be similar demographically to outside Murfreesboro or Clarksville or Memphis or Chattanooga. Right. Who is going to win for us? Someone who's a Brasher or a Brooks.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And you mentioned Sam Whitson, who is another retiring. And the elections aren't just Davidson County; they're House seats all around. Right. But want to dip into like some of these surrounding counties. That's in Williamson County. Whitson retiring, and there's sort of a scramble for his seat with folks pretty far on the right. But also a story that you also wrote for this issue that I want to dip into, kind of as our last thing. Senate District 18. Farrell Hale's seat out in Sumner County. He's being challenged by a constitutional Republican. For the listeners, not the watchers, I'm putting that in quotation marks because that is how he bills himself. Chris Spencer. So what's that race look like?
That the whole constitutional Republican versus Sumner County Republicans versus Sumner County Conservatives versus Tea Party Freedom Caucus it's such a red area that there's all these kind of factions and groups that are basically arguing over who's more conservative or who's a more real conservative or a more traditional conservative, what conservatism means, because they're not really having viable Republican, liberal, Democrat, like there's not really this interplay between the parties, so it's within the party that there's this drama that's happening.
Yeah.
So Chris Spencer, it's not clear what his job is exactly. He had run for alderman in Hendersonville, which is like local elected official in Hendersonville. I'm looking at Patrick because that's his neck.
It's like their city council situation.
And he lost that race, and then he sued the fire department, accusing them of like intervening. So he's very much like confrontational.
He's in the mix.
He's comfortable being in the spotlight. He wants to be in the spotlight. Run and lost for office before, but he's been part of this splinter movement, the constitutional Republicans, who accuse the traditional Republicans of being rhinos, which is like this slur, like
Republican
you're not a real
only.
Republican.
Okay.
And Farrell Hale, who has softened a little bit on the hard GOP stances against reproductive rights and guns. Like Farrell Hale has at times sought some nuance in those
he's shown some support for things like abortion exceptions,
which sometimes it's just like, well, yeah, maybe we should look at that.
Right, as simple as that, or like
certain
things with guns and that sort of thing. It's really just sort of
taking things into consideration.
Yeah,
right,
really,
but
just kind of statesman style discussion, right?
In such a conservative area, that makes you a leftist.
Right. That gives you daylight.
You know,
he wants to consider this,
right?
Yeah, if you're not an absolutist on a lot of things, and I mean,
exactly.
yes, I am from Sumner County. Do not hold it against me. But that is like just something you kind of and I think he's Gallatin.
It's Gallatin and Sumner County. Trousdale County is the Senate district. And so that's the fight that's going on there. Is that Spencer is from the right pointing to Hale and says he's not our real conservative. I'm the real conservative. And there's a lot of online posting, Facebook, Instagram. Like it's a very online campaign. And what's interesting about this is that Spencer appears to be like reproducing a lot of the conservative media stuff, like talking points that we hear about trans people, against trans people, or against people being not real conservatives, like we said. But it's not clear whether that will translate into actual votes on the ground.
Right.
So it's like, posts don't vote. People vote. So we're going to see if this movement is strong enough, kind of like, what Ogles did from the right a couple years ago. Is this like activist conservative movement strong enough to take down Hale, who's very entrenched, very well respected and well liked within his district as a senator?
Right. And Chris Spencer has things on his website like, Farrell Hale voted against the Bible because there was some bill
like
about a state book.
Yeah,
and
clickbait.
And the other interesting thing is the last thing that I'll add. When you talk to people in Sumner County, or when I talk to people in Sumner County about this race, they also point out that as Nashville has grown, a lot of people, as we know, have moved here from other states, California, New York, or Texas, Florida, whatever. The people who have been directed or flocked to Spencer's campaign, they say is a lot of new residents. And there's also a school board race in Wilson County. I think this last name is it Gregory Homan or something like that, who just moved here from California. And I think we have had this assumption, or some people, I've heard this assumption, that people moving here from liberal states are liberals, and that's going to change the city or the state. And it doesn't appear to be the case. They're actually, anecdotally, they're escaping, in their words, political persecution.
I've heard the expression political refugee used
I've talked to people who have used that about themselves and their families, especially after COVID. They're leaving California because
very funny to hear them use the word refugee.
And they are saying, like, we're coming to a state that embraces us and embraces our politics. Like I said, one is running in Wilson County. And apparently the buzz is that if you look closely to see who's posting and who's supporting Chris Spencer against Farrell Hale, it's a lot of these newer people who come with extreme politics. And they're still mad about vaccines. Spencer still makes that a campaign talking point. And about vaccine mandates and the way the government handled COVID. And so it's interesting to say, well, okay, with this big influx, it's been a lot of extreme Republicans and conservatives who have left these states because they see Tennessee as a friendly place. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot to write about, and there's a lot to cover, and this is just the beginning of it because, of course, once this, the primaries pass on August 1st, then we've got a good 3 months for campaigning toward the general. So we'll be back to talk about that, I'm sure. There's
a lot to talk about. One thing else we want to talk about we all know I have this great, amazing show at Nashville PBS, right? A Slice of the Community.
Of
Check
course
it out.
we
Check
know.
it out.
Yeah.
But Joe Moore, who's the founding host of Tennessee Crossroads, passed away recently, unfortunately. But we're doing a celebration of life for him at Nashville PBS on July 25th at 2:30. Go to www.nptw. Let me get this right. www.wnpt.org. Go to the events page. Go to Eventbrite if you would love to come and celebrate Joe. I know a lot of people grew up watching Tennessee Crossroads, and so come out. You know what I'm saying, to Nashville Public Television if you haven't been. But
he's a local icon.
Local icon, local
Legend.
icon, a television legend. Tennessee Crossroads is a legacy show, and
I kind of called it like Nashville's very own Mr. Rogers, kind of, different programming, but same sort of spirit.
Yeah, for sure. And
cool.
like it was just an honor to be able to be in the same room with him and talk to him and get gems from him. And like he is like public media, right? He is public television in many ways and sorts. So go support Joe. Celebration of Life.
July 25th.
July 25th.
Do it.
Wednesday, next Wednesday, July 25th.
Awesome.
So
Great.
So
Cool. Thank you, Jerome.
No,
thank you, Eli.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you for doing all the hard stuff and breaking this
You
down.
took on a lot for this issue. Thanks for that. Yeah.
So because like people don't read this stuff, but they'll listen.
Don't say that.
Read it. But you got options.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. Lots of different stories behind just the race.
Yeah, for sure. But like, subscribe, comment, whatever you need to do.
Stay tuned for more season 2 coming up soon.
For sure.
Thanks, guys.
We out.